Hey everyone, this is Mr. Franzen. Bishop Brossard High School's Seek and Find ministry is a ministry aimed to seek students where they are in their faith and help them find Jesus in their life. We do this by providing faith-based media content and learning opportunities to help students deepen their faith. Right now, we are in the middle of releasing episodes of our series recapping the TV show The Chosen. I have guests such as Mr. Zengel, Mrs. Hensley and her husband Jacob, as well as Miss Tallarigo. While we created this content with Brossard students in mind, adults will also relate to all of it. We recorded these episodes in 3 big individual sessions, but I've edited them into individual episodes. I recommend watching the season of The Chosen first, and then come back and enjoy the recap episodes. Now let's go ahead and get to the next episode. Thanks for listening. Episode 7, which is one of everybody's favorite episodes as well. 2 big events happen in this episode. So the episode is titled Invitations. And so it's plural because 2 people in particularly are getting invitations, Nicodemus and Matthew. Not a lot happens with Matthew, though, until the end of the episode. But it's a great part. So, but the conversation that happens mostly that people are talking about is Jesus agrees to meet Nicodemus. And he's going to meet him in the middle of the night on a rooftop at a place that Jesus already had set up, basically. And one thing that's cool about this is, yes, it's between Nicodemus and Jesus, but, you know, we have documentation in Scripture of this. So the way that's kind of portrayed is there's 2 people who are sort of on watch. One, you see John. This might be the first time where you see John taking notes.
He's taking notes. He's writing, yeah.
Yeah, he's writing this down. He's like, can you believe all of this? And he's writing all of this down. And Andrew's just... Once again, in Andrew's way to show his faith, he's just hanging on to every word, and he's filled with the faith in this moment. So, some of the questions here. Hold on. So Jesus says to Mary, Mary's asking Jesus about meeting him, and Jesus says, Mary's apologizing to Jesus. I'm sorry that I brought them to you. I didn't mean to cause a scene. And he goes, with their faith, they would have found a way whether you brought them to the roof or not. So he's basically saying, don't apologize. Knock it off. Matthew is talking to somebody, questioning him himself. He says, my whole world, everything I thought I knew, what if it's wrong? He was talking to his mom.
His mom.
He went to visit his mom.
He went to visit his mom, and his dad wasn't there.
And his dad wasn't there. And so he's, in some ways, it gives his mom hope, I think, because she sees him differently. He actually showed up, and he mentions to her that he stopped by on Shabbat, didn't he?
Yep.
And he didn't want to come in.
Didn't want to come in.
So but she has a little bit of hope that he's questioning some things, but she's also very concerned about him.
Yeah, he's weird, so.
Yeah, there you go. Jesus says to Andrew, you are there to guide our guests, not be my protector. Because I think Simon was trying to say, come on, I can come. And he's like, no, you stay here with your mother-in-law, I believe, and your wife. So Jesus and Nicodemus are having this interaction. And a couple of things that stand out, and these quotes are the same ones I had written down at home that I forgot to bring my notes. Jesus says, I know, great, how great am I? If I have told you of earthly things and you do not believe, how can I tell you of heavenly things? Because he is really struggling to fight this Sanhedrin world that he lives in, but also what he knows he just saw.
Right.
Nicodemus says, my whole life I've wondered if I would see this day. And I mean, they talk about a lot. There's so much jam-packed in there. I need the scripture in front of me to know it all, but I'm sure you have a lot of it written down. Don, tell me what you got.
So, first of all, if I just think about that scene up on the roof, those of you who get into CGI and stuff, that's all fake. It was all done in the studio, which blows my mind, because I stopped it to look at the scenery when I rewatched it.
Yeah.
To think that they were sitting on a flat stage when they filmed this, with just the table and a couple of the little things behind the ladders and stuff. Everything else was CGI'd in. It just blows my mind. Anyway, back to what they're saying. So Nicodemus has tons and tons of questions, but everything that Nicodemus asks, I think, can be thought of in two different ways. He's asking for himself, do I need this? Is this what I need to do? Mm-hmm. Do I need to stop believing this? Does this change everything I've learned? But it's also, every time that I can put the word I in there, I can also put the two words, the world, in there. Is this what the world needs? Is the world wrong? Is the world doing this wrong, kind of thing? And Jesus never really answers either one of those questions.
Right.
He never really says, you need to change, or the world needs to change. He just keeps going back to things like, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. When he says, am I to believe the kingdom of heaven is here? He says, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. And then he says, is the world, am I to understand that the king of the world is here and that we will perish if we do not follow? And Jesus makes the comment as something like, not all will follow, but all will have the opportunity to receive. Like just general comments like that. Right. That, in a way, they're the most beautiful things in the world, these comments. But they're also, I don't know, this is going to sound crazy, but they're also one of the problems we have with people saying, I don't need to go to church.
Right.
Right? You're telling me that Jesus is going to forgive me my last 10% of my life on earth, then why do I have to put in the work now?
Right.
And Nicodemus is figuring this out. He's figuring out, I've put in all the hard work. And he has. He's the highest of the highest that we've been introduced to so far. There's nobody higher in the faith world at this time that we've been introduced to.
Right.
He is the teacher of teachers. And he's basically saying, everything I've done is for nothing. Right. And Jesus is not saying it's for nothing, but he's basically saying, no, you've prepared the way. You've straightened the way, just like Crazy John is saying. But your way needs to be adjusted.
Right.
And he's inviting him to come, which he ultimately does.
Right.
Come follow me, which is creepy because we always like to hear the 12 people who said yes.
Correct.
How many people did he actually ask?
Yeah.
Right. This is one example.
How many people said no or couldn't do it?
We have also the story of the rich man.
The rich young man, right? So how many of those stories go undocumented?
Right.
Think about some of the people, and it's a beautiful scene in the end of the next episode of Nicodemus not being able to go.
Right.
Of him just bawling his eyes out. But it's crazy to think the opposite of the people following him.
There's also some other things he challenges, because he sort of challenges, him to say, well, that's what the Romans are worried about, talking about the kingdom. And he goes, no, I'm not here
I'm not here for an earthly kingdom.
Correct. And that's what a lot of the followers are thinking. Like, they're waiting for this military, political
rich man
who's going to create an army and overthrow the Romans, but that's not what he's here for. And when he says, I'm here to defeat sin, Nicodemus is sort of floored like that. But he's also relieved. He's like, well, I can just tell the Romans this is all about sin. He's not a problem.
Right. Which he does later do.
He does.
Yeah.
But in the end, you can clearly see Nicodemus believes who he is.
Right.
And he even kneels and is in tears. Well, they do a good job of weaving in some humor too.
Oh, yeah.
And because Jesus is talking about being born again of the Spirit. And he's like, what do you mean being born again? I hope you don't mean going to my mother's womb, because she is dead.
She has been gone for quite some time.
And then he goes, being born of water and the Spirit, alluding to baptism.
And whoever believes in me will not be condemned.
Yes.
Which I think is beautiful, because Nicodemus, we don't see Nicodemus, spoiler alert, we don't see Nicodemus a lot in season 2, 3, 4.
Nope.
He's not in 3 and 4 at all, I think. I think he's into a couple of little moments. But we know the story of Nicodemus at the end. He comes back at the gravesite. He's part of the people who take him down and help. So whoever believes in me will not be condemned. So even though he wasn't there throughout Jesus' public ministry, most of it, he won't be condemned. He knows he has got a place in heaven.
Right. There's also a moment in Scripture somewhere, I think it's in John, where he's questioning other members of the Sanhedrin, like, why are we not giving this man a trial. Basically,
Right.
he's trying to push
The night that he's on trial. Yeah.
the night that he's on trial. He's like, why aren't we giving this man a legit trial and let him speak? And it kind of fast forward very quickly to they just choose through the whole interaction with
which I mean, there's some scenes coming up that I can't wait to see how they're displayed.
Yeah.
That's got to be one of those.
Yes.
Like with Jesus and Mary across the dance floor when they're partying. There's going to be another moment like that with Nicodemus and Jesus.
I think there's going to be some sort of way where Jesus is sort of thanking him.
Right.
And giving, because we feel like Nicodemus is a good man.
Yeah.
Right.
But we also know he wasn't able to fully go all in.
Yeah.
And how many
He's
of us are like that?
non-committal.
Yeah.
How many of us are like that? On a daily basis. Maybe
Abby is.
Yep, that's me.
well, maybe all of us to some
All of
degree
us.
are all in at times, but there's also times where
we're not all in.
I can't tell you how many times just what we're doing right now. I'm like, is this really going to work? Are people even going to listen? Like, am I asking these two people to do a lot of work and it's not going to do anything? Because it's going to take me a long time to make cuts of all this. Like, it takes a lot of work, and I sometimes wonder, is it worth it? But then in the midst of doing this, like, this is.
Yeah.
I hope people enjoy the show as much as we have, or just it helps them in their faith. But what it reminded me of, that whole interaction with Nicodemus, was how I often think I don't know how to reach people who are so fixated on the world. But I have to remind myself it's not us who are responsible. It's Jesus in the end. We just have to propose it. And I think that's kind of what Nicodemus sort of does in that moment in the end. He's like, guys, why aren't we treating this person fairly? Let's hear his words and what he has to say. But the world will try to shut you out, regardless of what kind of political system you're in.
And at the end of that little romantic dinner they have up there, whatever you want to call it, Nicodemus kneels and kisses his hand and stands up and they hug. And Jesus says this line, and blessed are those who take refuge in him, the Son of Man.
Yep.
Because we assume Jesus already knows Nicodemus isn't coming.
Right.
Yeah.
Even though in the next episode it looks like Jesus thought maybe he was coming.
Right.
Jesus already knows.
Right.
So he's telling him, you're still blessed.
You're so close.
You're so close. Yep.
Yeah, it's important to mention that, even though it's in the next episode. It kind of concludes our Nicodemus story for now. But there's also, if we can go ahead and talk about that real quickly before we talk about Matthew, you can tell why Nicodemus is struggling because his wife is having interactions with him too. His wife is telling him, I love our world. Can we get back to our world? Your grandchild has just been born.
Had another grandchild born.
Yes.
They want him to snip the...
Yes. The brisk.
The brisk. They want him to do the official cut.
And he is, you can tell he's struggling. He's like, I love our world too. And she's basically pulling him back in.
Oh, yeah.
And in some ways, it's noble for him to want to take care of his family first before dropping it. But Jesus told some of the other apostles to drop their families and to follow him. And we'll see a cool interaction also in episode 8 with Simon and Eden and Jesus.
Well, you can see the relationship too between like Eden and Simon, and then Nicodemus and his wife. Like how
mirrors each
Eden
other.
is completely like Simon comes back and tells Eden. I don't think we talked about that, but he comes back and tells Eden, and Eden's like, "Yeah, you have to follow him.
Absolutely.
Like, why are you even asking?"
Right. They were making wine.
Yeah,
That's a beautiful scene.
Yeah,
It is.
And
I went out and bought a wine press and stuff. I wanted to do that with my feet.
You did not.
No, I didn't.
Okay, well, let's conclude episode 7 because it's a quick ending. Because right after all this stuff happened with Nicodemus, they are all together and they're sort of walking past the tax collector's booth where Matthew is, and there's literally nothing's being said yet. There's this music that starts playing in the background, and here's my Jesus impression, and he goes, they're sort of walking away from the booth. Then Jesus stops, turns, looks at Matthew. Matthew's just like in awe, waiting to hear what Jesus is going to say. And he's like, Matthew, son of Alphaeus, follow me.
Yeah.
And Matthew, without any hesitation, gives his keys to Gaius, his assistant there, who's protecting him, whatever. And he's like, what are you doing? He's like, Gaius, let me go.
Yep.
And he's following him. There's a picture right there with him handing him the key. And Simon and Andrew are agitated at this point. They're like, what are you doing? Do you know who this is? And he's like, yes, I do.
Yeah.
And that's when Jesus says, "Get used to different," I
Right.
believe.
Yep.
Which is one of the
To Peter,
chosen-
to Simon.
Yeah, one of the T-shirts you can buy from the Chosen website. He says, "Get used to different," and
Because
it's so
Simon
true.
had just said, yes, I know what I'm doing. You didn't understand what I was doing. And he said, this is different.
That's right.
Right? Get used to different.
Yeah, and they're walking away, and he tells Matthew he's going to host him for dinner, and
Yeah.
that's how the episode ends.
Where are we going? We're going to a party. I'm not invited to parties. Well, this one's different. You're hosting it.
Yeah, that's why I love.
Yeah,
I
that's
love
great.
how they portray it. Thank you for listening to this episode of the BBHS Seek and Find podcast. If you like what you heard, please like and share with a friend. Be sure to subscribe to all of our social media. You can follow us on Instagram and YouTube at BBHS.SeekandFind. You can also follow us on Facebook at Bishop Russer High School Seek and Find Ministry. Once again, thanks for listening, and may God bless you today.